When you go silent on a narcissist, the first and most significant shift you create is the sudden loss of control they feel. Narcissists are wired to dominate interactions. They don't just enjoy attention, they depend on it. The constant back and forth, the reactions, the arguments, even the moments when you're defending yourself all feed into their need to feel powerful. When you step away from that dynamic and choose silence, it's like shutting the door to their favorite source of energy. That loss is immediate, and it hits them in a place they don't want to admit exists. For someone who thrives on control, silence is unsettling because it's unpredictable. They know how to handle arguments. They know how to twist words, spin situations, or play the victim when you engage with them. But silence doesn't give them a script to work with. They can't twist your words if you don't give them any. They can't play the victim if you don't react to their attempts. Silence removes the entire playbook they rely on, and that leaves them scrambling for strategies they don't have. Control for a narcissist is about certainty. They want to know that no matter what happens, you'll respond, you'll explain, or you'll defend. Your silence disrupts that certainty. Suddenly, they're left questioning what you're thinking, what you're planning, or what you're feeling. And here's the irony. They want to appear confident and in charge, but deep down, they crave reassurance. Silence denies them that reassurance, which creates a spiral of insecurity they'll desperately try to cover up. When control slips out of their hands, narcissists often respond with escalation. They'll test you with little comments, subtle digs, or dramatic displays meant to get under your skin. They'll act as if they don't care, but in reality, your silence is the only thing on their mind. They might even try to provoke reactions from people around you, hoping word will get back to you and force you to break your quiet stance. This behavior reveals just how dependent they are on your involvement to maintain the illusion of control. Another layer to this loss of control is the way it challenges their sense of superiority. Narcissists position themselves as the center of gravity in every relationship, expecting others to orbit around them. Your silence is like stepping out of that orbit, refusing to revolve around their demands, and instead creating your own center of gravity. That shift is subtle but incredibly disruptive. It reminds them that they're not as powerful as they believed and that their influence is limited by your choice to engage. The loss of control also exposes one of their biggest fears, being ignored. For someone who builds their identity on being noticed, praised, or feared, silence feels like invisibility, and invisibility is terrifying to them. They'd rather have negative attention than no attention at all, because at least negative attention still confirms they matter. But silence sends the message that they don't hold the weight they thought they did, and that message cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Finally, silence forces them to confront a reality they avoid at all costs. They cannot control everything. For most people, that realization is uncomfortable but manageable. For a narcissist, it feels like a collapse of their carefully constructed world. That loss of control leaves them vulnerable, exposed, and uncertain. And while they'll fight hard to mask it, you'll see it in the way they react. The sudden intensity, the desperate moves, the exaggerated behaviors designed to pull you back in. When you go silent on a narcissist, the quiet doesn't stay quiet for long. They will do almost anything to break that silence because for them, your attention is oxygen. And when you cut it off, they panic. That panic doesn't show up as calm reflection or self-awareness. It comes out as provocation. They start looking for ways to poke, prod, and push you until you react, because any reaction, even a negative one, restores the control they feel slipping away. Provocation is one of their strongest tools, and it comes in many shapes. They might throw insults, attacking your character, your appearance, or even your past mistakes. They might suddenly act cold, pretending you don't matter, just to trigger your curiosity or hurt your pride. They might even flip to being overly sweet or apologetic, offering charm as bait. The goal is never about truth or reconciliation. It's about pulling you back into their game so they can feel powerful again. This is where many people struggle because provocation is designed to hit where it hurts. Narcissists know your weak spots. They remember the things you've confided in them, the insecurities you've shown, and they use those as leverage. When you stay silent, they may suddenly bring those things up in sharp ways, knowing it could ignite anger or defensiveness in you. It's not random, it's calculated, because they've learned exactly which buttons to press. Sometimes the provocation doesn't come through direct conflict, but through passive-aggressive behavior. They may post things on social media that are clearly meant to get your attention. They may start talking to mutual friends in ways that are guaranteed to circle back to you. They may create scenarios where jealousy or fear of missing out is triggered, all with the intent of breaking your silence. They want you unsettled because unsettled people tend to react. And then there are the dramatic displays. They might suddenly act like the victim, exaggerating how much your silence has hurt them. They may accuse you of being unfair, uncaring, or even cruel. They may stage emotional outbursts, hoping you'll feel guilty enough to respond. All of these tactics serve the same purpose: shifting the spotlight back onto them and away from your decision to disengage. It's not about resolution, it's about attention at any cost. Another common provocation tactic is baiting through urgency. They might create fake emergencies or crises just to force communication. They could send you alarming messages or claim something is wrong, hoping your concern will override your silence. This is one of the most manipulative forms of provocation because it preys on empathy. They know you care, and they will exploit that care to draw you back in. It's a reminder that silence isn't just difficult for them, it's intolerable, so they'll escalate until they get results. At the heart of all these provocations is the reality that your silence is working. If it weren't, they wouldn't need to try so hard. Their desperation to provoke you shows exactly how dependent they are on your engagement. It reveals the cracks in the image of control they try so hard to maintain. And while it may feel overwhelming to face their tactics, remember that each attempt is proof that your silence has shifted the dynamic in ways they can't stand. When you go silent on a narcissist, one of the most powerful consequences is the emotional discomfort they are forced to experience. Narcissists spend much of their lives avoiding that inner void, that emptiness they don't want to face. They distract themselves with attention, drama, validation, or control, anything to avoid sitting alone with their true feelings. Silence removes those distractions. It leaves them with nothing to feed on, and suddenly the quiet becomes louder than anything else in the room. This discomfort often starts as restlessness. They don't know how to handle the lack of response, so they pace mentally, searching for ways to break through your wall of quiet. The emotions they work so hard to suppress, feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, or fear of abandonment, start bubbling up. For someone who constantly pushes those emotions down, having to sit with them is deeply unsettling. Silence doesn't just deny them attention, it forces them into a confrontation with themselves they've spent years avoiding. That confrontation creates anxiety. They begin questioning their grip on you, their influence, and their sense of power. Their mind races with doubts. Why aren't you responding? What are you thinking? What does this silence mean for their control over the relationship? This isn't just a small worry for them. It cuts directly into the fragile self-image they've built. The discomfort is like a mirror they don't want to look into, showing them that they're not as invincible as they like to believe. At the same time, silence triggers their fear of rejection. For someone who thrives on constant validation, the idea that you could step away or that your attention could shift elsewhere is terrifying. Rejection isn't just uncomfortable, it's catastrophic to the identity they've constructed. The longer you stay silent, the more that fear grows and the discomfort deepens. This is why they often resort to escalation or provocation, because the alternative is sitting in that unbearable stillness. You'll also notice that their discomfort can look different depending on how they react to it. Some narcissists lash out, becoming angrier and more volatile the longer they sit with silence. Others withdraw into sulking, passive-aggressive behaviors or emotional manipulation. Either way, the root is the same. They can't stand the discomfort that silence creates. They crave your reaction, not just because it restores their sense of control, but because it distracts them from the hollow feeling that grows when they're ignored. The discomfort also exposes the gap between who they pretend to be and who they really are. On the outside, they present themselves as confident, untouchable, and in charge. But your silence pierces that illusion. It reveals the insecurity underneath, the fragility of their ego, and the fact that their confidence depends on external validation. Sitting in silence highlights that gap, and it's not a picture they want to face. That gap is what makes them push harder for you to break your silence. Perhaps the most telling part of their emotional discomfort is how much effort they put into avoiding it. They will cycle through anger, guilt trips, charm, or manipulation, anything to escape that feeling. They'll distract themselves with new sources of attention, but even those won't fully quiet the discomfort your silence leaves behind. It follows them like a shadow, reminding them that no matter how much they demand control, there are moments when they can't get it. And for someone who builds their identity on control, that's one of the hardest truths to endure. When you go silent on a narcissist, one of the most important shifts that takes place is the reversal of power. Normally, they set the pace of the relationship. They decide when to engage, how the argument unfolds, and which direction the conversation takes. They thrive on keeping you reactive, always responding to their words or actions. But when you choose silence, you take away that control and flip the dynamic. Suddenly, they are the ones reacting, and you are the one setting the tone. That reversal is unsettling to them because they are not used to being in the position of uncertainty. Narcissists count on your predictability, your tendency to explain, to defend, to clarify. They know your patterns, and they use them to stay in charge. But silence disrupts that pattern completely. You are no longer following their script, and that unpredictability strips them of the upper hand. It forces them to step into a role they hate, the one without answers. This shift in power is not about shouting louder or proving them wrong. It's about withholding the very thing they rely on most, your energy. Silence communicates something stronger than words could ever say. It says, "You don't control me anymore." And that message unsettles them, not because you've attacked them, but because you've shown you don't need to participate in their game. That choice is powerful because it moves the control away from their hands and back into yours. When power reverses, their behavior often becomes exaggerated. They may escalate their attempts to draw you in, becoming louder, harsher, or more dramatic. Or they might shift to charm, suddenly becoming overly kind or apologetic. Both are attempts to regain the upper hand. But here's the key: whether they act out aggressively or play sweet, they're still reacting to your silence. That reaction itself proves that the balance of power has shifted because they are now responding to you instead of you responding to them. Power reversal also creates space for you to think clearly. When you're caught in constant back and forth arguments, it's easy to feel trapped, like you have no control. But silence breaks that cycle. It gives you the chance to step back, breathe, and see the situation for what it really is. In that clarity, you realize the control was never theirs to begin with. It was something you gave them by engaging. By reclaiming your silence, you're reclaiming your ability to choose what deserves your energy. For the narcissist, this reversal is a direct challenge to their identity. They define themselves by control, by being the dominant figure in relationships. When you disrupt that, it shakes the foundation they stand on. They may try to deny it, act like they don't care, or pretend they're still in charge, but their actions betray the truth. The harder they work to pull you back, the clearer it becomes that they've lost the position they once held. What makes silence such an effective form of power reversal is that it doesn't require confrontation. You don't have to argue, explain, or justify. You simply withhold the reaction they want, and that changes everything. It's not aggressive, it's not emotional, it's firm. And in that firmness, you show a kind of strength they can't manipulate. That strength is what turns the tables and reminds them, whether they admit it or not, that the balance of power has shifted in your favor. When you go silent on a narcissist, the most powerful result isn't what happens to them, it's what happens to you. Silence creates a path to freedom, a space where you are no longer chained to their constant need for control, drama, or attention. For so long, they may have dictated the rhythm of your life, pulling you into cycles of conflict, guilt, or obligation. But silence interrupts that pattern and opens a door you may not have realized was possible. It's not about punishing them, it's about reclaiming yourself. That path to freedom starts with clarity. When you stop engaging in endless arguments and explanations, your mind begins to clear. You start seeing things for what they really are instead of how they've been twisted. Silence gives you perspective because you're no longer caught in the noise of their manipulation. You realize which thoughts belong to you and which were planted by them. That clarity is liberating because it helps you separate your truth from their control. Freedom also shows up in the form of peace. Narcissists thrive on chaos, and when you're constantly in their orbit, peace feels impossible. Silence creates distance, and in that distance, calmness grows. You're no longer on edge, waiting for the next conflict or preparing for the next outburst. Instead, you start experiencing what life feels like when your energy isn't drained every day. That peace doesn't just heal you, it reminds you what normal is supposed to feel like. Another part of this path is the strength you build. At first, staying silent may feel uncomfortable, even unnatural, because you're used to defending yourself or trying to make things right. But the longer you practice silence, the stronger you get. You learn that you don't need to respond to every provocation. You discover that your worth isn't measured by how much you tolerate, that strength grows with each choice to stay silent, and it becomes a foundation for your future relationships. Silence also gives you the freedom to redefine boundaries. For so long, boundaries may have felt useless because they never respected them. But when you step back and stop engaging, you begin building boundaries that aren't about changing them. They're about protecting you. You decide what access people have to your energy, what kind of communication you'll allow, and how you'll respond when someone crosses the line. This shift turns boundaries from words into action, and action is where freedom begins. The path to freedom also means rediscovering your identity. Narcissists often blur that line, making you question who you are, what you believe, or what you want. Their control thrives on confusion. Silence gives you time to reconnect with yourself outside of their influence. You remember what brings you joy, what goals you have, and what values matter to you. That rediscovery is one of the greatest gifts of silence, because it rebuilds the confidence that manipulation tried to take away. Finally, silence leads you to independence. You stop relying on their approval or fearing their disapproval. You stop measuring your choices by their reactions. Instead, you begin living from your own center, free from the constant pull of their control. This independence doesn't mean isolation. It means strength. It means knowing you can stand on your own 2 feet without being weighed down by their games. And in that independence, you find the freedom you've always deserved.